Welcome to our discussion today. We're turning our attention to a musical act that, well, it occupies a very specific and often misunderstood place in the history of popular music.
We are talking about Bananarama.
Exactly. And for most people, that name probably conjures up a very particular set of images.
Oh, absolutely. You're thinking late 80s.
You're picturing the big hair, the dungarees, maybe the coordinated hand movements, and that really polished high-gloss pop sound that just dominated the radio waves.
And that's not wrong. That was their commercial peak, for sure.
It's factually correct, yes. But if you stop there, you are missing, well, the vast majority of the actual narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you peel back that layer of sort of bubblegum pop, you find something significantly grittier.
It's a real juxtaposition, isn't it?
It is. You find a group that has its origins not in some record label boardroom, but in the punk rock scene of London, living in, relative squalor above a rehearsal room used by the Sex Pistols.
And that's a connection the general public rarely makes. The popular memory of Bananarama is of the ultimate girl group, almost a manufactured pop confection.
Right.
Yet their foundation is built entirely on that post-punk, do-it-yourself ethos that really characterized London in 1980.
So from an analytical perspective, what's the real significance? It has to go beyond just 80s nostalgia.
Oh, it goes far beyond it. We're looking at a group that holds a Guinness World Record.
For what, specifically?
They achieved the highest number of chart entries by an all-female group in the world.
In the world. That's a huge distinction.
It's a statistical fact that places them in a category entirely their own. I mean, they've surpassed groups that are perhaps more critically acclaimed or, culturally canonized, especially in the U.S.
That is remarkable, and it's something we're really going to explore in detail today. Our mission for this discussion is to trace that biography and trace it comprehensively.
From the very beginning.
We're going to start from their formation in 1980 and move all the way through to the present day.
Yeah.
The goal is to uncover the facts that completely contradict that lightweight image people might have.
To get to the real story.
Exactly. We want to understand how three friends went from facing genuine homelessness in London to becoming a key component of what's often called the second British invasion of the United States.
Right.
We need to bridge that gap between the punk anarchists and the global pop superstars.
And to do that effectively, we have assembled a pretty wide range of sources. We're using historical chart data from both the UK official charts and Billboard.
Okay.
We're also looking at detailed biographical records, interviews given by the band members over the last 40 years, production credits that span 4 decades, and, of course, contemporary critical reviews.
So it's a very broad scope.
It is. It allows us to track not just their popularity peaks and valleys, but also their artistic evolution and the specific business decisions that allowed them to remain a functional entity for this long.
So let's begin by setting the scene. It's September 1980 in London. This is a very specific time and place in cultural history, isn't it?
It is. Punk is mutating into new wave and post-punk. The city is vibrant, but it's also gritty. It's not the polished London you see in films.
And in this environment, we have the convergence of three young women. First, you have Sarah Dallin and Siam Fefe.
Right. They're both students.
They were studying journalism at the London College of Fashion, which is part of the University of the Arts. Then you have Karen Woodward.
And her background was a bit different. She was working at the BBC in Portland Place.
So how do these three distinct individuals actually come together to form a unit?
Well, it's worth looking at the background dynamics there. Sarah Dallin and Karen Woodward were actually childhood friends.
Ah, okay, so they knew each other from before.
Oh, yeah. They had known each other since they were roughly 4 or 5 years old. They grew up together in Bristol before they both moved to London.
And that's where Siobhan Fahey comes in.
Exactly. Meeting Siobhan at the London College of Fashion was the catalyst that turned a duo of friends into a trio. But the living situation is really the key element here.
Why is that?
It's where the punk connection stops being just a stylistic choice and becomes the literal reality of their daily existence.
And this is one of the most interesting parts of their early biography, I think, because it creates such a massive contrast with their later wealth and fame.
It really does.
Dallin and Woodward, they were initially living at the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association,
Mm-hmm.
but they were in a precarious position. The sources suggest they were right on the verge of being made homeless.
They had no money and nowhere to go.
And the person who stepped in to resolve this housing crisis was not a parent or a landlord, but Paul Cook.
That is Paul Cook, the drummer for the Sex Pistols.
The fact that they were even in a position to be offered housing by a member of the Sex Pistols says a lot about their social circle at the time.
They were already in that scene. They'd met him at a club and they had become friends.
So Paul Cook offers them a place to live, but it wasn't a standard apartment, was it?
No, not by a long shot. It was a room located directly above the former Sex Pistols rehearsal room
Where was this?
on Denmark Street in Charing Cross. Denmark Street is legendary in British music history. It's often called Tin Pan Alley.
Right, but living above a punk rehearsal space at that time, I can only imagine what that must have been like. An intense sensory experience, to say the least.
It was certainly not a luxury accommodation. It was a functional space for a rock band.
Mm-hmm.
But by living there, they were physically embedded in the absolute center of the London music scene.
And that environment had to have shaped their early musical identity.
It completely shaped it. They were immersed in the noise, the attitude, the aesthetics of that subculture. They were not aspiring to be polished pop stars in the traditional sense, like the idols of the 1960s.
They were part of a different movement.
They were ardent followers of the punk and post-punk scenes. And if you look at their activities during this specific window of 1980 and 1981, it wasn't about learning choreography or refining their harmonies.
What were they doing?
They were performing impromptu sets at clubs. They were jumping on stage to do backing vocals for bands that were firmly in that alternative underground scene.
And the list of bands they associated with is it's a who's who of the indie and punk world at the time.
It really is.
We're talking about the Monochrome Set, a very art school post-punk band. They worked with the Professionals.
Which was the band formed by Paul Cook and Steve Jones after the Sex Pistols broke up.
They did vocals for Iggy Pop.
Iggy Pop, it's incredible.
They even did work with the Jam and the Nipple Erectors.
Which was Shane MacGowan's first band, of course, before the Pose.
This is a resume that reads like a history of the underground, not a prelude to, top 40 domination.
Not at all.
And in the midst of all this, they chose the name Bananarama. It sounds like a nonsense word, something designed to be silly, but there is actually a specific cultural reference embedded in it.
There is. The name was derived in part from the Roxy Music song Pyjamarama.
Ah, Roxy Music. That makes sense.
Yes, Roxy Music was a massive influence on the art rock and glam rock scenes that preceded punk, and they retained a lot of credibility in the post-punk era.
So combining banana with the drama suffix.
It reflects a slightly art school, glam rock influence. It suggests they weren't taking themselves too seriously, but they were also nodding to the music they loved.
So they're living in Denmark Street, surrounded by equipment, singing backing vocals for Iggy Pop. Eventually, in 1981, they decide to record their own demo. Now, if you're a group of 3 young women in London trying to get signed, the conventional wisdom would be to record, a popular cover or a catchy pop song.
That's what you'd expect.
They did not do that. They chose to record I Am a Wanna.
That choice is incredibly significant when you're analyzing their artistic intent at the time. I Am Wanna is a cover, but it's a cover of a song by a group called Black Blood.
And the critical detail here is the language, isn't it?
It is. The lyrics are sung entirely in Swahili.
In Swahili.
For a debut demo by 3 British women in 1981 to be sung in Swahili was a highly unconventional, even risky move.
What does that signal to you?
It signals that they were interested in rhythm, in world music influences, and in doing something that just stood out from the standard guitar rock or synth pop of the day. It aligns them more with bands like the Slits or Bow Wow Wow, who were also experimenting with tribal rhythms and non-Western sounds.
And that risk actually paid off.
It did. The demo found its way to Demon Records, which was an independent label. They liked the sound and offered Bananarama their first deal.
So the song was released and it gained some traction.
It did. It wasn't a chart topper by any means, but it became an underground hit. It reached number 92 on the UK charts.
Number 92 might seem negligible in the grand scheme of their career.
It might, but for a debut single in a foreign language released on an independent label, getting into the top 100 was a real validation. It proved there was an audience for their specific sound.
And that led to bigger things.
That initial success led to them being signed by a major label, Decca, which was subsequently renamed London Records. And this began a long-term relationship. They remained with London Records all the way until 1993.
But the jump from number 92 to the top of the charts didn't happen because of radio play alone. It happened through print media, didn't it?
Yes, which was the primary discovery engine for music in the pre-internet era. There was a UK magazine called The Face.
The Face, hugely influential.
Arguably the most influential style and culture magazine of the 1980s. The Face featured an article on Bananarama following the release of I Am Wanna, And that article was seen by Terry Hall.
Terry Hall is a pivotal figure here, formerly the frontman of the Specials, the legendary ska band.
Right. And after the Specials dissolved, he formed a new group called Fun Boy 3. He was looking for vocalists to collaborate with on his new project.
And he sees the article in the face.
He saw the article, liked their look, heard their sound, and invited them to collaborate on their upcoming album.
This collaboration resulted in the track, "It Ain't What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It." And this is the moment the trajectory just shifts vertically.
Completely. This wasn't an underground track hitting number 92. This was a cultural event, a mainstream breakthrough.
What was the chart impact?
In 1982, that song hit the top 5 in the UK singles chart. It transitioned Bananarama from being this interesting, cool, underground act living above a rehearsal room to being recognizable national pop figures.
It put them in front of a mass audience.
A huge audience. And crucially, the collaboration was reciprocal. It wasn't just Bananarama backing up Fun Boy 3.
Right, because Fun Boy 3 then returned the favor. They appeared as guests on Bananarama's single Really Saying Something later that same year.
And Really Saying Something also performed exceptionally well, reaching number 5 in the UK.
So that cemented their status.
It did. They proved they weren't just lucky guests on a Terry Hall record. They could deliver a top 5 hit under their own name. This established them as a commercial force in their own right.
Which leads us into the release of their debut album, Deep Sea Skiving, in 1983. By this point, the anticipation had to be high. They had the singles, they had the press.
And when the album dropped, it confirmed they had arrived. Commercially, it was a very strong start for a debut.
How did it perform?
The album peaked at number 7 on the UK albums chart and was certified silver by the British phonographic industry.
And in the States?
In the United States, it reached number 63, which is a very respectable entry for a new British act at that time.
And the production was mostly handled by Jolly and Swain.
Yes, that production team really defined their early sound. It was polished, but it still retains some of that looseness and rhythmic focus that characterized the band's early appeal.
Looking at the track list for Deep Sea Skiving, you see a real mix of their influences. We've already mentioned Really Saying Something, but this album also gave us Shy Boy, which is another massive hit, reached the top 5 in the UK.
And they included a cover of Nah Nah Hey Hey, Kiss 'Em Goodbye,
which also reached number 5 in the UK.
You can see a pattern emerging in their repertoire already. They had a distinct talent for selecting older songs, often from the 60s or 70s, and completely modernizing them, making them their own.
But there's an interesting divergence on this album, isn't there? Between critical reception and chart performance. Specifically with the track Cheers Then.
Yes. Cheers Then is a song that often gets overlooked in the greatest hits packages, but it's quite different from their other work. It was the 3rd single from the album.
And the critics at the time were very favorable toward it.
Very positive reviews from the music press. Critics appreciated the tone, the more melancholy atmosphere, and the production quality. It showed a different side of the group, less raucous and more reflective.
But the public didn't respond in the same way.
No. Despite the critical acclaim, it only reached number 45 on the charts. It serves as an early lesson in the music industry that critical success does not always correlate with commercial sales.
The public wanted the high-energy fun tracks.
It seems so, even if the critics appreciated the ballad.
So around this time, moving through late 1982 and into 1983, the group began a concentrated effort to break into the United States market. In the early 80s, before social media or global streaming, the only way to break America was to physically go there and get on television.
It's the only way.
So Bananarama embarked on promotional press tours that hit all the major touchstones of American pop culture. They appeared on The Uncle Floyd Show, American Bandstand, and Solid Gold.
And that television exposure was absolutely crucial. American Bandstand and Solid Gold were the gatekeepers of the American teen audience. You had to be seen in living rooms to sell records in the Midwest.
And that groundwork paid off in 1984 with their first major top 10 hit in the United States.
Cruel Summer.
Cruel Summer is a song that really stands out, not just in their catalog, but in the entire canon of 80s pop. It reached number 8 in the UK and number 9 in the US.
Structurally and tonally, it's so different from a standard bubblegum pop song. It has a gritty, oppressive feel to it.
Yes, it captures the feeling of a hot, miserable city summer rather than a beach party.
Exactly. But a massive part of its success in the US came down to its inclusion in a very specific movie.
And that would be The Karate Kid.
The song was prominently featured in the soundtrack for the 1984 film. The Karate Kid was a box office phenomenon, and the soundtrack was just ubiquitous.
That placement exposed the track to a massive, captivated American audience that might not have seen them on solid gold.
And its legacy is substantial. VH1 later ranked it number 44 on their list of the 100 greatest songs of the 80s, and Billboard named it number 13 on their list of the 100 greatest girl group songs of all time.
So it's a track that has really endured.
Far better than many of its contemporaries, yes.
Following that breakthrough, they released their second album, simply titled Bananarama, in 1984. It performed well, reaching number 16 in the UK and number 30 in the US.
That's solid follow-up.
But I want to pause the chronological progression here to focus on one specific song from this album. This track completely shatters the idea that Bananarama were just lightweight pop stars singing about boys and parties. We need to discuss the single Rough Justice.
This is undoubtedly one of the most serious and poignant moments in their entire discography.
It reached number 23 in the UK, so it was a hit. But the subject matter is just incredibly heavy.
It is. The lyrics deal with a specific tragedy involving the band's inner circle. The song was written about Thomas Riley.
Who was their road manager?
Their road manager, yes. But to understand the weight of this, we have to look at the connections. Thomas Riley was the brother of Jim Riley.
And Jim Riley was Siobhan Fahey's boyfriend at the time, and also the drummer for the prominent punk band Skiff Little Fingers.
So this was family. This was very close to home.
And the facts of the case are just stark.
They are. In August 1983, Thomas Riley was shot and killed by a British soldier in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He was a civilian.
And the song Rough Justice is a direct, emotional response to that killing.
It's effectively a protest song and a song of mourning. It addresses the political reality of the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
For a group that was being marketed to teenagers as a fun, carefree pop act, releasing a song about a shooting in Belfast involving their own road manager, that was a bold and deeply personal artistic statement.
It completely contradicts the perception of the group as manufactured or disconnected from reality.
It's so rare to see that level of reality intrude into the top 40. It shows a depth and a willingness to use their platform to address personal and political pain that they almost never get credit for in general retrospectives.
It adds a layer of complexity to their history that's often missed. On that same album, they had Robert De Niro's Waiting, which was a massive, lighthearted hit, reaching number 3 in the UK.
Right.
But the presence of Rough Justice ensures that the album is not just fluff. It documents their actual lives.
There's another interesting historical distinction involving Bananarama from this specific year, 1984. It involves the charity supergroup Band-Aid.
And the recording of Do They Know It's Christmas?
Yes, they hold a unique distinction regarding that charity single.
They do. Bananarama are the only artists to appear on both the original 1984 version and the 1989 Band-Aid tour version.
That is a fascinating statistic. It really highlights their longevity, doesn't it?
It does. Siobhan Fahey was in the group for the 1984 recording. By 1989, she had left, and Jackie O'Sullivan had joined, so O'Sullivan appeared on the second version.
It means the brand of Bananarama was consistently relevant enough to be invited back 5 years later, which was a lifetime in the fast-moving 80s pop market.
It demonstrates their sustained relevance across that 5-year period, which was a very volatile time in British pop music. Many of the acts on the 1984 record had completely vanished by 1989, but Bananarama remained.
Okay, so moving into 1986, we enter a completely new era for the group. This is the release of their third album, True Confessions. And this is where the production sound starts to shift dramatically.
It really does. Up until this point, Jolly and Swain had been their primary producers. They produced the majority of True Confessions as well, keeping that familiar sound.
But the band was looking for something different.
They were, something more aggressive and dance-oriented, and there were notable exceptions on the track list that were produced by the production trio Stock Aitken Waterman, often referred to as ASOL.
And Stock Aitken Waterman became the dominant sound of late 80s pop. But Bananarama was one of the first major acts to really harness their machine.
They were, and one of the tracks they produced became Bananarama's biggest international hit. We are talking, of course, about Venus.
Venus. Another cover.
Yes, another very clever cover. It was originally recorded in 1969 by the Dutch rock band Shocking Blue.
And the original was a psych rock track with acoustic guitars, a totally different vibe.
Bananarama's version completely transformed it. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States. That was their commercial peak in the American market. They had conquered the U.S. charts completely.
The transformation wasn't just musical, though. It was visual. If Cruel Summer was gritty, Venus was pure gloss. The video for Venus was in heavy rotation on MTV.
The imagery was distinct and highly stylized. You had the choreography, the costumes, specifically the devil outfits,
Right.
and these high-gloss production values. It marked a definitive shift in their categorization. They moved firmly into the high NRG and Eurodance genres.
For the listener who might not be a genre expert, how would you describe the difference between their old sound and this new high NRG sound?
Well, the previous sound, produced by Jolly and Swain, had a more organic feel. It often used traditional instrumentation mixed with pop sensibilities.
And high energy.
High energy, and specifically the Stock Aitken Waterman sound, is almost mechanical. It relies on a relentless, high-tempo synthesized beat, usually around 120 to 130 beats per minute. The bass lines are sequenced and octaved.
It's a sound designed for a very specific purpose.
Exactly. It's designed specifically for dance floors and club sound systems. It's precise, loud, and very aggressive compared to the sort of laid-back groove of Cruel Summer.
Following the massive success of Venus, the band decided to go all in on that specific sound. For their next album, Wow, released in 1987, they worked extensively with Stock Aitken Waterman.
They did.
Wow.
Performed moderately in the UK and US album charts, but it was a massive hit in Australia where it reached #1.
And it produced some of their most recognizable singles, the ones that really define that late 80s pop aesthetic.
I Heard a Rumor, which reached #4 in the US, and Love in the First Degree.
Love in the First Degree reached #3 in the UK. It's often cited by pop critics as just one of the best pop records ever made.
It's a perfect construction. That Motown-influenced melody over a high NRG beat. It's flawless pop.
But this period of high success also brought major internal friction. The shift to this manufactured sound didn't sit well with everyone in the group.
No, it didn't. In early 1988, Siobhan Fahey left the group.
And the context of her departure is significant. It really speaks to that tension between artistic credibility and commercial success.
It does. Fahey had married Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics. Creatively, she was just moving in a different direction.
She felt stifled by the saw machine.
Reportedly, yes. She didn't want to be a cog in a pop factory. She wanted to return to something with more edge. After leaving Bananarama, she formed Shakespeare's Sister with Marcella Detroit.
A completely different project.
And that project allowed her to explore a darker, more alternative, and even gothic sound, which was perhaps a return closer to those post-punk roots we discussed at the very beginning.
So Siobhan leaves. This is a crisis point. Sarah and Karen are left with a decision. Do they fold the band or do they continue?
And they decide to continue. In March 1988, they bring in Jackie O'Sullivan.
O'Sullivan was formerly of the Shalala Sisters, a rockabilly band.
A different background again. Her introduction marked the beginning of the second official lineup. It was a clear signal that the brand was bigger than the individual members.
They didn't waste any time either. They re-recorded some of the hits from the Wow era with Jackie's vocals to establish her presence.
Yes, they released I Want You Back and Nathan Jones' I Want You Back hit #5 in the UK. It was a successful transition.
And it was during this period, specifically around the release of their greatest hits collection in 1988, that they achieved that Guinness World Record we mentioned.
Right. They entered the book as the all-female group with the most UK chart entries in history. It's a record they still hold.
That's incredible.
It is. It's a testament to the sheer volume of their output and their consistent ability to just scrape into the charts, even if they weren't always #1.
And that consistency allowed them to mount a massive tour. In 1989, they embarked on their first world tour.
This tour covered North America, East Asia, and the UK. It was a major logistical undertaking.
What did that prove, in your view?
It demonstrated that even with the lineup change and the shift in sound, their global fan base was intact. They could sell tickets in Tokyo and New York.
However, the musical landscape was shifting again. The 80s were ending. Acid House and the Manchester scene were taking over the UK.
A very different vibe.
In 1991, this new lineup released the album Pop Life. And this album marks another evolution. They started working with the producer Youth.
The collaboration with Youth, who was the bassist for Killing Joke, another legendary post-punk band, brought a completely different texture to the music.
How so?
They moved away from the mechanical saw W sound. They incorporated elements of reggae, flamenco guitar, and the emerging acid house and dub sounds. It wasn't just straight pop or high NRG anymore, it was more atmospheric.
And the reviews reflected that change. Entertainment Weekly described Pop Life as moodier than their previous work. They said it ventured into dark tunnels of dreamland.
That is quite a description for a Bananarama album, isn't it?
It is.
It indicates that they were experimenting with the soundscape. Tracks like Tripping on Your Love fit that description perfectly. It fuses dance beats with a psychedelic edge.
But shortly after this era, the lineup fractured again. In 1991, Jackie O'Sullivan left the group.
She did, which left Sarah Dallin and Karen Woodward, the two childhood friends from Bristol, as a duo.
And this begins a long period where they continued as a two-piece entity. Their first album as a duo was Please Yourself, released in 1993.
Please Yourself was a return to a very specific sound and a bit of a retreat from the experimentation of pop life.
What was the concept?
It was conceptually billed as ABA Banana. The production was pure Europop, leaning heavily into that 70s ABA influence. You can hear it clearly on tracks like Moving On and their cover of More, More, More.
Just a strategic move.
A very strategic attempt to capture the European market that loved that classic pop sound.
The mid-90s were a difficult time for a lot of 80s acts. Britpop was taking over, and older pop acts were often discarded by labels.
It was a tough period. In 1995, they released the album Ultraviolet.
And this album had a very fragmented release.
It did, which tells you a lot about their standing in the industry at that moment. It was available in Europe, North America, and Japan, but it was not released in Britain.
What does that signify?
It shows the vagaries of the music industry and label politics. They were popular enough to sell abroad, but their home country's industry had effectively moved on.
They kept working, though. They didn't just disappear. In 2001, they released Exotica on a French label.
With Exotica, they were experimenting again, trying to find a place in the modern pop landscape.
What kind of styles?
There were R&B influences, some Latin sounds, and a cover of George Michael's Careless Whisper. It was a period of trying new things, even if the commercial impact in the UK was significantly lower than in the 80s. They were surviving as a touring act and a cult favorite.
But then, in 2005, they had a genuine resurgence. They released the album Drama.
Drama was a significant comeback. The single Move in My Direction reached number 14 in the UK.
That was their first UK Top 40 entry since 1993.
An incredible gap. It proved they could still chart, and that there was still an appetite for new Bananarama music, not just nostalgia tours.
And they had a big club hit in the US from that album, too.
Yes, Look on the Floor, Hypnotic Tango, climbed to number 2 on the U.S. Hot Dance Club Play chart. It showed they still had relevance on the dance floor decades after their debut.
Let's bring the timeline closer to the present. In 2007, Rhino Records reissued their first 6 albums,
which sparked a lot of renewed interest in their back catalog, especially among collectors and younger fans.
Then in 2012, they performed at the London Olympics.
They did. They performed a medley at the men's beach volleyball final. It was a high-visibility moment that really celebrated their legacy as British icons,
placing them alongside the biggest names in British culture.
Exactly.
But the news that really shocked the fan base came in 2017. Siohan Faye, who had left in 1988, rejoined the group.
This was the original lineup tour, and it was a massive deal.
They hadn't performed together as a trio in nearly 30 years.
No. They performed 23 sellout dates in the UK in late 2017. Followed by dates in North America in 2018. It was a victory lap that acknowledged the chemistry of the original 3 members.
After that tour, Siobhan stepped back again, and Sarah and Karen returned to the duo format. In 2019, they released the album in stereo. And then, most recently, in 2022, they released Masquerade.
Masquerade shows they are still active in creating new material. They released singles like Favorite, the title track Masquerade, Velvet Lies, and Forever Young. These aren't just legacy releases, they're fully produced pop albums.
It's just remarkable longevity. We're talking about a career that started in 1980 and is still producing albums in the 2020s.
The statistics reinforce that. Between 1982 and 2009, they had 32 singles reach the top 50 of the UK singles chart.
32.
They have survived the transition from vinyl to cassette to CD to streaming, and from punk to pop to dance.
It's a long, long way from living above the Sex Pistols rehearsal room in Denmark Street with no money.
Indeed. It demonstrates a rare ability to adapt to different musical landscapes. Punk, new wave, Eurodance, pop, while somehow maintaining a distinct identity.
And they were always more involved than people think.
They were. They managed to navigate the industry on their own terms, often writing their own hits, which is something they do not always get enough credit for. They were not puppets. They were the architects of their own survival.
They certainly have a story that is much deeper than the Venus video might suggest. Whether it's singing in Swahili, writing about political tragedies, or holding world records, Bananarama has left a mark that is undeniable.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.